Most of us have an idea of pulp horror without knowing what it actually is. The term conjures up images of scantily dressed women being menaced by a sadistic monster, men in trench coats clutching a revolver in a dark alley, enormous crabs emerging from a black lagoon to attack the sleeping residents of an unsuspecting town. It's hard to think of a modern horror writer who hasn't been influenced by these tropes, and in this video, we'll be exploring the humble origins of their genre and how they evolved into the likes of Pennywise the Clown.
Kiss me, fat boy!
Pulp Fiction is generally thought to have begun in 1896 with the launch of Argosy magazine, a cheap publication full of untrimmed pages and adventure. The word pulp actually refers to the quality of the paper, as well as the sensationalist stories printed on them. Tarzan was among those in the Argosy, and its success led to the development of similar magazines. Weird Tales is probably the most iconic among them, for being home to three of the most important names in horror. H.P. Lovecraft, Clark Ashton Smith, and Robert E. Howard fused the macabre with fantasy and science fiction into some of the most chilling tales of the era. They each contributed to the Cthulhu mythos, a shared universe initiated by Lovecraft, in which highly evolved aliens take the place of occult deities. The Call of Cthulhu is about their high priest on Earth, who slumbers in the ocean and is so ghastly in appearance that emerging from his temple would drive the whole world mad. Lovecraft also wrote The Shadow of Innsmouth, about a village of fishy cultists, and The Colour Out of Space, about an unfathomable meteorite poisoning the countryside.
The only thing that pulls its weight around here is my goddamn truck!
Robert E. Howard is best known for his Conan saga, following a prehistoric warrior, which embodies most of the tropes of the Pulp Era. His adventures are bloody and highly sexual, often depicting an undressed woman being kept prisoner. One of Pulp Fiction's biggest selling points was its erotic cover art, and the magazines were often kept below the counter. It led to a subgenre called shudder pulps, which also featured highly sexualized women, now menaced by deranged serial killers. Its content so lurid and cover art so provocative that campaigners effectively banned them by the early 40s. Other contributors to horror pulps include M.R. James, who wrote less titillating stories about academics delving a little too deep into history. His most famous story featured one of the first instances of a ghost in a white sheet, as a result of a professor unearthing a strange whistle from the ruins of a Knights Templar. H.G. Wells serialized The War of the Worlds in a pulp magazine. His tale of alien invasion fused horror with science fiction, the invaders desecrating London in terrifying tripods before succumbing to infection. The demise of pulp horror is often attributed to the paper shortage during World War II, and a diminished interest in sensationalist fiction, as real horrors enraptured the globe. This is a mistake, in my opinion. Pulp horror blurred lines with science fiction, crime, and fantasy, and there was actually an increased interest in this style of writing during peacetime that gave it the momentum to spawn separate genres of fiction. The 50s ushered in hundreds of magazines, printed on trimmed paper, which emphasized specific topics. Genre fiction was born, but pulp fiction was not without its legacy. Modern writers continue to contribute to the Cthulhu mythos, and many horror novels still blur the lines between genres. It, by Stephen King, is one of them, the protagonist facing off against a monstrous clown, who is actually a shape-shifting alien from another universe.